Hello, my name is Christy Grayson, and I'm currently the commander of American Legion Post 484. I'm here to talk a little bit about the history of women in the military. Women have served this country from the American Revolution to the current global war on terrorism. Today, women in the military serve in all ranks, from privates to generals, seamen to admirals, and in every job from mechanic to aviator. Early on, women courageously served on the battlefields as nurses, water bearers, and cooks. Some even dressed as men and took on a man's persona, oftentimes not being found out until they were wounded and their secret revealed. In 1908, women finally became valued members of the military when President Theodore Roosevelt established the Navy Nurse Corps. But it wasn't until the last 2 years of World War I that women were officially allowed to join the military service. In 1917, the Navy allowed women to serve, followed shortly afterwards by the Marine Corps and Coast Guard in 1918, and the Air Force in 1948. The oldest military service of America, the Army, recognized an indentured servant who joined the Continental Army in 1781 by disguising herself as a man. Over 33,000 women signed up to work as nurses and in other support roles during World War I, resulting in more than 400 nurses giving their lives serving America during the Great War. During World War II, women again answered the call to serve. In 1942, the Navy established the Women Accepted for Volunteer Emergency Service, or WAVES, and the U.S. Coast Guard created Semper Paratus, Always Ready, or SPARS. In 1943, the Women's Army Corps, or WAC, was created. Women could now attain military rank and serve overseas. They received the same pay, benefits, and rank as their male counterparts. Also, in 1943, hundreds of women participated in the Women Air Force Service Pilots, WASP, program. These pioneer female pilots helped test and ferry military aircraft around the country and were led by Jacqueline Cochran, the first woman to break the sound barrier. More than 1,100 young women, all civilian volunteers, flew almost every type of military aircraft. They ferried planes from factories to military bases and departure points across the country, tested new planes, and towed targets to give ground and air gunners training opportunities using live ammunition. It wasn't until 1977 that WASP members were officially recognized as Air Force veterans. In 2010, they were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. It wasn't until 1948 that women finally took an essential first step towards becoming equal members of the United States Armed Forces. You see, at the time, if you were not a nurse, you could not enlist during peacetime. Then, World War II created a need for soldiers and changed the military non-combat ranks. In an effort to free up men to fight on the front lines, the armed forces recruited women for non-combat roles. The other hundreds of thousands of women who had served during World War II were expected to walk away from their military service and rejoin civilian life. This campaign led to President Truman signing the Women's Armed Services Integration Act into law in 1948. The law allowed women to serve permanent members of the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force for the first time in American history. Women were finally able to serve their country as members of the U.S. Armed Forces, regardless of whether the country was at war or peace. But in reality, the act severely restricted their service. It limited the number of women who could serve to 2% of any military branch, allowed the military to involuntarily discharge women if they became pregnant, and limited the number of women who could become officers. It prevented women from commanding men and ever serving in combat. These restrictions did not deter those women who still wanted to serve. During the Korean War, nurses again played a crucial role. Air Force nurses evacuated injured soldiers from battle zones, and many women served in mobile Army surgical hospitals, on medevac aircraft, and on hospital ships. As with previous wars, most women served during the Vietnam War in Vietnam were military nurses, and nearly all of them were volunteers. Other positions women held included physicians, air traffic controllers, intelligence officers, and clerks. It would take decades for the restrictions to change. Slowly, women's roles expanded. In 1970, women were finally allowed to rise to command roles in non-combat units, and women and men began training together. Female promotions to Brigadier General came to the Army in 1970 and to the Air Force in 1971. The first female in the Navy to be promoted to the rank of Rear Admiral came in 1972. Marine Corps promoted their first Brigadier General in 1978. And lastly, the Coast Guard promoted their first one-star Admiral in 2000. Maternity uniforms were finally introduced in the 1970s, and women were allowed to continue serving in the military throughout and after their pregnancies. Females weren't allowed to attend the Forced Service Academies until 1976. In 1980, 54 women graduated from America's service academies for the first time. Over half the graduates from the U.S. Naval Academy went on to become career naval officers. Speaking of officers, maybe one of the most influential female naval officers of our time has to be Rear Admiral Grace Hopper. Admiral Hopper was a computer programmer and played an important role in the development of the COBOL programming language. She helped shape how programmers code today and is often credited with popularizing the term debugging. She served on active duty for 19 years and retired from the Navy at the age of 79, the oldest serving officer in the United States Armed Forces. And she even has a U.S. Navy ship named after her, the USS Hopper, DDG-70. It wasn't until 1994 that women were assigned aboard a combatant ship, and that ship was the aircraft carrier USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, CVN-69. In 2013, women achieved full status in the military when they were granted the right to serve in direct ground combat roles. Shortly after that, in 2015, 2 female Army captains became the first women to graduate from the U.S. Army Ranger School. Today, women make up approximately 15% of the active duty United States military and 18% of Reserve and Guard. They now make up approximately 10% of the current veteran population. Young women just beginning their careers in the military service need to see and know that no door will be closed to them. Today, women serve their country in all ranks and perform their duties all over the world. From directing planes on aircraft carriers to taking command of a United States ship, fighter squadron, or major military installation, women have excelled. There is nothing they can't do. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Ray Perkins. I'm a retired C-130E model loadmaster. I've got 26 years with the Air Force. I've also got 4 years with the Army. I started in the Army and then I switched over to the Air Force and had a whole lot more fun. We're standing in an airplane section here, the Air Force portion of the U.S. Army Air Corps, and transitioning into the Air Force. In World War I, the military, the Air Force portion of it, was a part of the Signal Corps of the United States Army. When they participated in World War I, the military had about 23 aircraft, and most of them belonged to France. We spent about a year there, and then after the war, the U.S. government downsized everything and got rid of virtually everything that they had in World War I. After that, about 1939, President Roosevelt, feeling that there might be more conflict coming in Europe and maybe around the world, started building up military industries, particularly the aircraft industry. And in here, you're going to be seeing a lot of the pictures of the aircraft that participated in World War II. And starting at the very front, we've got aircraft of the P-39. We've also got a P-51. At the very top is a B-17. And moving across the wall, we have aircraft that include trainers like the AT-10 and the English aircraft, the Hurricanes and the Spitfires. There's more of the P-51s and more of the B-17s. And going on across, at the very top we have the bombers. There's a B-25. And then moving across the top we have the P-51s at the top. On the top right is a B-24. Below that is a P-38. Moving on down, we get into some of the Navy carrier aircraft. And at the very bottom on the right-hand side is a P-47. In the center is an A/B-26. And then moving back across on the right-hand side, we have more aircraft, mostly trainers. And we've received from Tuskegee Airman Colonel Bob Friend one of his posters, and below that is the aircraft that he flew in World War II, a P-51 that he labeled Bunny. And with all of that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Wayne Wright, whose father participated as a bomber pilot in World War II, and he has more information for you.
Good morning. I'm Wayne Wright, Chief Warrant Officer, United States Army, retired. I'm a retired aviation warrant officer and served during the Vietnam War and subsequently as a helicopter pilot. Today I'd like to share with you some information of one of our post-VFW members here in Simi Valley, who's passed on about 4 years ago now, who was very close to me. My father, Ferd Wright, Technical Sergeant, United States Army Air Corps during World War II. Behind me, you'll see a collage of photographs were taken of the 394th Bomb Group B-26 Martin Marauder named Hannibal. You will see my picture of my father, which was an official U.S. Army Air Corps photo taken after his 65th combat mission in late August of 1944 in England. On the other side, adjacent to his picture, is a picture of his crew, and also a photograph that was taken by another bomber of the 587th Squadron during a mission of the B-26 named Hannibal. Hannibal was named after the aircraft commander, Gaines, Lieutenant Gaines, who was a college student before the war, and it was named after his automobile, which he called Hannibal. Why, I don't know. But anyway, that crew, which formed in 1943 at Scottsfield, Illinois, the 394th Bomb Group, all 4 squadrons, and they deployed to England in late 1943, early 1944, and began combat operations flying out of Boreham, north of London, about 40 miles, in late February, March of 1944. They racked up a very credible combat record during their tour of duty, and a book was written by them called The Bridge Busters, which I have a copy. It's out of print now, but it chronicles the combat activities of the 394th Bomb Group and during 1944-1945. The B-26 Martin Marauder was a very fast aircraft for its time. Twin-engine reciprocating aircraft, had a top speed of close to 300 miles an hour. Although my father told me that when it was heavily loaded with bombs and ammunition on missions, they were lucky to do 250 miles an hour. But they had a relatively low casualty rate, even though they had a loss rate of about a third, about 30% of their aircraft overall That was much less than the heavy bombers of the 8th Air Force, which had a casualty rate of, and sometimes in excess of 50%. I hope that you will take a look at our exhibits here, and I hope this will prompt further study into bomb groups such as the 394th and the accomplishments they made in the course of World War II, and the sacrifices they made as well, as many of them were lost. Thank you very much for your attention.